Hey boys and girls, Doug Giles here. It's Warriors Rip
and Wildmen. What's happening, Doug?
So I think this is a good segue, Rich, to go into our 7 things that I hate about Satan. And it's the temptation to not joyfully take life seriously. We haven't really talked about all the malevolent crap that's going down here in the United States. And some people still aren't even focused on the hijacking that's going on. They're into minutia. They're into the inconsequential.
Yep.
And, you look at Paul. Paul's a great example. I'm not saying that Peter and John and all the other disciples weren't, but Paul was damn near giddy, man, when he was doing all of his havoc wreaking on Satan's strongholds. I mean, you see him constantly happy in prison, happy in life. And it's not because he lives in some kind of stupid, ether that he got shot up at the dentist's office. He joyfully took his life as serious business. And I think we need to get a lot of people who are happy warriors to climb back in that fray, because there's 2 temptations, is to not take life seriously, or if you do take it seriously, have Satan and the powers of darkness just absolutely drain any kind of vestige of joy, of victory, and of hope. Listen, we're not left alone at our own devices here. We're not powerless. We need to understand who we're connected to, the God of the universe. And when you hear all these horrible things that are being done to our nation and what's happened at the southern border, God's still in control. He's still God. He's omniscient. I think he still sees everything that's going down. He just needs some people to take life seriously and do it joyfully and jump into the fray, with a water pistol, with the confidence that, hey, maybe I can extinguish these hellish flames.
Yep, absolutely. And the problem, like you said, a lot of people just ignore it so they don't have to deal with it. That's not the answer. And then other people, instead of thinking about it, they overthink it. And then that leads to depression. That's also not the answer. So we have to consider it. We have to be aware of what's going on in the world. We have to know what's going on. We have to listen to the Lord and see how we can make an impact and a difference. But ignoring it's not the answer. That's actually, that's like a soldier in battle just saying, nah, I'm not going to do it. We have to be in the battle, but we have to enjoy our life. You can't just enjoy your life when everything's going well, or you're never going to enjoy your life. Me personally, I like when everything goes crazy. That's when I'm at my best. Let's do it. Let's do the dance. Let's get this thing rolling. Let's have fun. Let's get together. Like I was listening to that guy, Chad Wright's little rant on his Instagram. I was showing you that this morning. And I like what he says. Your men's group isn't a club. It's not for you. We should be there for each other. We should be there taking care of each other's families. We should figure out how to support each other and start being warriors instead of wimps. And too many people are just not interested. They'd rather be in denial.
I had this guy, probably nearly 40 years ago. So Mary Margaret and I were dating, about to get married and stuff, and he was a very wealthy young man. He was a rich young ruler, Rich, and he and his dad were sitting back there, and they're very solvent, had a lot of money. I mean, nearly $1 billion.
That's a lot of money.
Had a $1 billion company, and so they're looking at me, and I'm just standing there, holding my Coke or whatever. And they said, "So, Doug, what are you going to do with your life?" It's like, "I want to preach the gospel. I want to go into all the world." And they just looked at me with this kind of look of pity mixed with disdain. And and I quote, "Young man, don't take your life so seriously." And it was like I just had a conversation with Lucifer. So here I am. It's like, God, I'll give you my entire life. I mean, what you've done for me. I was a great evangelist for Satan. Now I want to be, a quasi-semi-decent evangelist for you. Just want to lead people to Christ. Want to preach the word of God. Want to help establish churches, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we didn't have a pot to piss in or a place to pour it out. And he's like, "Oh, don't take your life so seriously, little serious young man." So let's fast forward for 40 years. You ready for this?
Yep.
Mr. Don't Take Your Life Too Seriously drank himself to death. Had multiple affairs, a couple of children outside of his marriage. It got so bad with the alcoholism, he had to have his children pretty much wipe his ass and pull him off the floor and take the bottle out of his mouth, and left his company in absolute shambles because he had the motif, Rich, of don't take life too seriously. Listen, I think, I think I'm a warm, affable chap that has a decent sense of humor and likes to have a good time. But I'm not going to sit there and look at life and say, man, I shouldn't really engage this. I really shouldn't get involved in this, because my life is not my own, and how dare I be safe with it at any kind of juncture at all. It's time to speak out. It's time to take this business seriously. And again, Paul did it. I think Christ did it. He took things seriously, but same time, you see him yucking it up with sinners and his disciples and kids, and doing the same thing at wedding feasts. But he was a focused, laser beam on taking down bad issues and bad people and turning them into sawdust. So
Yep.
I don't, a lot of people, it's all, vacations, and play. And I'd say ministers probably waste more time than anybody. To me, I can't get out from underneath the saddle. You got to paint. You got to write. You got to podcast. You got to speak. And then when we're talking about the intro of this podcast, just looking at the ginormous Gibraltar-like mountains that are coming and that are here, that the church, family, and state are facing, and you're worried about stupid games and playing, you need to joyfully take life seriously. Because again, I think, Rich, this is a huge time in history, and it can either go, into the dark ages, or it can become another enlightenment.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And the reason people don't want to think about it is because thinking is hard. If I think about what's going on, then I can become afraid. And if I become afraid, then I have to trust in the Lord, and I have to rise up in courage. And then I have to ask myself something like this: God, like Henry Blackaby said, because people say, what can I do about it? Well, find out where God is moving and join him in his work. And people don't want to do that. They just want to focus on their life and their little things and ignore those things. Ignorance is bliss. And a lot of people live by that. They're like, well, how does it affect me anyway? And they don't think it matters, but it is going to matter. These things are coming down. They're happening, and people need to consider it, and they want to ignore it. There's no ignoring it, and especially if you're a man, you're leading your family, you better start figuring out some things.
I had this missionary buddy, again, 30 plus years ago. He would live with us when he'd come back to the States and raise money, which he usually just worked his butt off for my landscaping company. And I was a big adrenaline junkie back then, Rich. Rock climbing, rappelling, bungee cord, stupid stuff, ramp jumping, anything, that would tweak my adrenaline itch. I was in, to it. Preaching to bike gangs, anything that was just nuts. I would find myself, inserted into that equation. And I asked him one time, it's like, hey man, we're going to go rappel down the, about a 350 face up in Paladura Canyon. You want to go? So he used to be a big bodybuilder. So he wasn't some little skinny, typical missionary kid. Like, no, I can't walk or climb unless it's got carpet or concrete. So this guy was a full-on badass. He was doing mission work in the tail end of the Sierra Madre, way, way deep into Mexico. And he was working with the Huichol Indians and the Cora Indians, working to get their language into a written language, getting Wycliffe Bible translators to translate whatever he just developed as, their written language into chunks of the New Testament. And so I'm looking at him, it's like, this guy's he's got some gusto in him. He climbs mountains down there. He sees these tribes that are just so remote that you can't roll up to them. You got to walk, and rivers rise, and it cuts you off for 6 to 7 months to where you can't even get back to a crappy little town to get on a bus to get to Mazatlan to fly out to LA and come over to Texas. And so I'm sitting there kind of shaming him. It's like, come on, man, you want to do it, you chicken? And brother, he looked at me straight in the eye and said, I don't risk my life for stupid stuff. I risk my life only for the gospel.
Whoa.
Dude.
Good point. No argument. Well, that's what the machine gun preacher said when he was preaching in our church. He said because he was a hardcore 1%er biker gang, and he was in a biker club, motorcycle club. He was in a bar, and they got in a shootout, and one of his best friends got shot right next to him. And he said, it's not like the movies. People don't get shot and go, hey, put my gun in my other hand. He said they cry for their mom. And he said, and if you get stabbed in the stomach, the inside starts shooting to the outsides, and it's not like the movies at all. And he said he was in there, and he said, and he wasn't afraid of getting shot or stabbed or dying. He said, but I got terrified that I was going to die for nothing.
There you go.
And he said, and shortly after that, he got saved, radically converted, and ended up. And if you haven't seen the movie with George Butler, what's his
Gerard.
name? Gerard Butler, yeah, Gerard Butler, the machine gun preacher. You need to watch it. And if you're, this wonderful little Christian who doesn't say bad words, you won't like this movie because it's real life and it's a true story about a guy who goes to Africa and fights for kids that are being used in warfare and all that kind of stuff like that. But anyway, that guy's whole attitude was, I'm not dying for nothing. I'm not afraid to die. I don't want to die for nothing. So he went to Africa and he fought for kids, and he's like, I'm not afraid to die. And then he literally got the nickname, the machine gun preacher. And I think that's the deal, man. You can't die for something if you're not living for anything. I think it's terrifying to die for nothing. I went to a funeral. I actually conducted a funeral past weekend for a guy who was a cousin of mine through marriage. He died at 33 years old. Crohn's disease, had a rough life, a lot of stuff. And I knew him when he was a little kid. I loved him, And anyway, we went and they took the urn, and usually when I see people cremated, like that's it. You do the memorial service, right? But they did a graveside because they had what's called a niche. And a niche is just obviously a little niche in a wall. And then they put a granite plate over it, and then they put your name on there, and that's where your family can go when they want to remember you and things like that, which is cool. I have no problem with that, whatever. And so we went over to the cemetery to do that, and my whole thing at the cemetery was 2 minutes. I read some verses, and I read a prayer, this really awesome Christian prayer for burials. And so I did that, and then I went and stood in the back, and the construction guys come over. And you remember, Doug, when they used to lower people in the ground during funerals? And people would scream. People would scream and wail and lose their minds because of the finality of that, right? Like, this is it. They're going in the ground. For some reason, that thing is so shocking, right? It's just such a shocking thing. And so, because we believe in eternity, we don't want to think that our life, that's it. And so they stopped doing that at most funerals. They have the casket above the hole. The hole's covered with some nice green thing, and people put a little dirt on the casket, and then the family leaves, and then they lower it because people couldn't take it. Okay, so I'm thinking, what is this going to be like with this urn? Just from a psychological point of view, Christian point of view, what's it going to be like? They're going to put it in there, and we're all going to go there. Is it going to be kind of anticlimactic and like, okay, there it is? Well, they call the construction guys over, which is also shocking, right? Everybody's dressed up, and then here comes these two construction guys. They're just doing their job, and there's a wall, and there's all these other plaques on it, and they're with an electric drill, a screw gun. They're just taking it out, and the guy pulls this granite plate off, and he sets it down on the ground. It's heavy, right? And there's this hole in there, kind of diagonal shape, because it was a triangle, this whole thing. And the sister brings the urn up, and the construction guy takes it to put it in there. And this is the part that blew my mind, Doug. So he puts it in there, and we all see it. And the funeral director talks to the construction guy, and the construction guy gets the urn and slides it over to the side because he's freaking making room, bro, for the other family members that are sitting there.
Yay.
I don't know if they caught it because they were like, where do you guys want to go to lunch? And I'm standing there going, oh my God. If I was sitting in the front row right now, I would literally be thinking, he just made room for my body. But they didn't catch the seriousness of it. You know why? Because they're stupid. That's why they live stupid lives. But I was impacted, Doug. I was like, oh my God, look at that. We're all going to die. It had the same effect on me as when they used to lower the casket in the ground. And I was just looking at it. I was like, I'm going to be dead one day. And if I'm in an urn, they're going to stick it in a thing like that. And while I'm thinking that, Doug, the guy lifts up the huge granite plate and he puts it over it, screws it in there, and everybody starts walking away talking about lunch. And I was like, that's it, bro. That's it. They're going to be sad. They're going to screw that thing into place, and your life is over, and they're going to go do what they were going to do anyway. Bro, if people don't consider the seriousness of their life, that it has an end, you want to live a life worth living, a life that promotes and glorifies God, so that when you're dead, that somebody has something to say, and that
Hello.
somebody's sorry that they screwed the plate back in place and left your body there to go to lunch? Come on, man. There were people at a funeral trying to ignore that obvious reality, slapping them in the face. They were 25 feet away, Doug, and not paying attention.
That's America, baby. Only one life, though, Rich. As Amy Wilson Carmichael wrote, only one life will soon be past, and only what's done for God will last. And you get most Christians who are like, I want to emulate, what's that guy's name on Instagram? Dan Bazillion. I want to travel. I want to have all these photographs of me in these exotic locations. And then all of a sudden, boom, like your buddy here at 33, or, roll it out to 63.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm nearly 60, and
Right.
63 sounds mighty young to me.
Sounds close to me.
But it's not works based. I'm not like, I've got to do more work, so I'll be accepted. It's like, I just want to leave a massive scar on Satan's ass. I want to be busy. Jesus is coming. Look busy. And like Leonard Ravenhill said, he said, is what you're living for worth Christ dying for?
Come on. The Bible says it's appointed every man wants to live, to die, then the judgment. And so we know that. Now, if you're in Christ, we don't fear the judgment. We still have to consider it because we want to live a life that honors God. But how about just making your life count for somebody else other than being a consumer? I mean, come on, we have to be here for more than just self-gratification.
Yeah, if people think that, when I rock up to heaven, you've been this nominal Christian that have not taken life seriously in a joyful way, and you've been, a solipsistic, navel-gazing, self-obsessed me-monkey, and you make it in, like Paul says, through fire in 1 Corinthians 3, by the skin of your teeth, and which also Paul says that your works will be judged. Now, your eternal soul won't if you trust Christ and his righteousness, but your works will. And so for dipstick Christians who have been inactive, who haven't gone balls out in their relationship with God, who haven't joyfully taken life seriously, and they bought into that satanic BS to be a bench warmer or somebody sits in the nosebleeds, I think they'll be in the nosebleeds in heaven. Now, it's a great place to be. It's not hell. It's not the lake that burns with sulfur and fire and brimstone, the second death.
Gnashing
but you're
teeth.
I doubt you're going to have an all-access VIP laminate to toddle around with John the Baptist and Paul and Peter and the boys. Again, you're going to, I don't know how the ranking system works, but there's obviously people who, freaking gave their whole life, and they have an incredible treasure trove of Christ-centered works. And then there's other people that are like, come on in, I guess.
I don't want to be like that either. And you know what my goal is? Not to be famous to men, just to be famous to God. I just want them to know me and be like, this guy, he was a pain in my butt the whole time, but he was a trench guy. Just down in the trenches with everybody else. And you know what? Not because I'm like, I'm going to stay in the trenches with you little peasants. It's because I literally see myself like that. I am one of them. I'm not in the trenches because I chose to get in the trenches and work it out with you. I believe that life is a fight in the trenches. I'm just a guy in the trenches with people saying, come on, let's go. And I really see myself as a coach / cheerleader for people that are just trying to make it. That's what I try to do. That's what I want to do. I don't care about any of that other stuff. I care about the guy who's like, man, I've been on drugs. I'm trying to get off drugs. Let's go. If you got it all together, there's plenty of preachers out there that are going to help you. You want to get in the trenches and help some other folks? I'll get down there with you and let's do this thing.
Great point. I like it when Jesus said of John the Baptist, who had like a 2 or 3 year ministry and no miracles. He didn't raise anybody from the dead, didn't cast demons out of anybody, no resurrections, but he did what God called him to do. And Christ said of, men born of women, there's none greater than John. Of course, the New Testament saints, he says that they are, but I think it's cool that he said, John, who got his head lopped off, who didn't have a long ministry at all, he said he's great in God's eyes. Dude, if I could get that with all my past sins, foibles, stupidity, dyed hair, purple suits, lime green colored suits back in Miami, if I could have God say at the end of the day, well done, well done.
Yeah,
you jacked up, a couple of things here and there, and Yeah, you went over top, a little bit, but you did what I called you to do. You put brains and balls on believers. And so high five, man. There's the buffet over there. Wedding supper of the Lamb. We've got some great Cabernet. Take a seat. Take a load off, Bandy, and enjoy the next 10,000 years. We've got epic videos we're going to play of some of the greatest preaching moments of Paul, John the Baptist, Jesus, and Peter. It's going to be some cool stuff. So,
some videos of Elijah and Elisha.
Oh, dude, can you imagine? I just want to see it. I would love to see, Rich, how they preached compared to how preachers are preaching nowadays.
Yep, exactly.
Because there's a big distinction, because they said when Jesus opens his mouth, he does it with authority. He's not quibbling and quoting, like the scribes and the Pharisees.
Love it.
Cool, man. All right. Avoid the temptation to not joyfully take life seriously, because like Rich said, we're all going to take the big dirt nap, the audio snooze, the eternal siesta, and then boom, straight to the bema seat, and we're going to have to go toe-to-toe with the audience of one. And his eyes are a flame of fire, and a sword comes out of his mouth. And I don't think he takes kindly to people who've played games.
Hashtag boom.
All right, what do we do, buddy?
Go to warriorsandwildmen.com. Subscribe. It's free. We'll hit you up with a couple emails a week, let you know what's happening. Listen wherever you listen to your podcast. But make sure you subscribe. That way when we get to deplatform, which we regularly do, you'll still know where to find us. If you want to help us support the ministry, hit the war chest, tax deductible. We'll send you that information. For those that are supporting the ministry, we really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Warriors and Wild Men out.